Thursday evening to you, everyone. Welcome to Friday Eve, as I like to call it. How are you? It's good to see you. It's good to be seen by you. I, of course, am the one and only Bill Sylvie, aka the Dungeon Delver, coming to you loud and clear and live on a Thursday evening from an undisclosed location somewhere in the swamps of Central Florida. Oh, look, it's Kabuki Kid. I know we're not doing it this Thursday, but she will be my guest next week. Everybody tune in for that. We will finally get to meet Kabuki Kid live. I'm kidding her, of course. I just tease her about that from time to time. Odd Scimitar, good to see you. Damien247, Yang Yan Zhao. Anyway, hello. Welcome. Come in. Have a seat. Gonzalo Lira. How are you? I'm going straight to hell for this. Harder, Daddy. Anyway, I'm not right in the head. Daniel Basilis, good to see you. Robert Phillips, Ardu RPG. Things are fine. Things are really great. She's gone, by the way. She's left the chat. I said something absolutely horrid. But anyway, it was worth it. Giggity. North of the Rockies. Hello. No tariff doom. I'm not sure what that means. I'm not sure exactly what that means. But anyway, I'm glad you're all here, everybody. One of the things that I like to do around here before I kind of jump into the conversation is I need a little favor from you. If you have tuned in to this live stream and you have not already done this, and I'm putting a lot of conditionals on it. I know there's like paperwork you got to fill out and everything, and I'm sorry. And you like classic TTRPG live streams and newsy videos, RPG news videos, live plays, interviews with creators, both from the beginning of the hobby to today and everything in between. If all of that is your bag, baby, do me a favor, click the subscribe button and click the bell icon for notifications, and you will find out all about what is going on here at the Delver's Dungeon channel. And I hope you guys will want to come back again and again and hang out and enjoy. And also, if you would please, if you like this video, look, whether you're watching it now or tomorrow or 5 years from now, or 50 years from now, and I'm long dead, click the thumbs up button. Give me a thumbs up. Give me a like. In the afterlife, let me know that my social media is spreading. So thank you all for doing that. But anyhow, let's not dwell on what may come 50 years in the future. Let's talk about the here and now. And what are we going to talk about tonight, boys and girls? Well, this is a little slice of hobby history, particular classic TTRPG hobby history. If you're one of those people, like most people who started with basic or AD&D, you know, one of the curious things is that they're in basic Dungeons and Dragons, and I think the expert rule book, but don't quote me on that second one, but definitely basic Dungeons and Dragons, and possibly Holmes D&D, and absolutely first edition advanced Dungeons and Dragons. There's a lot of suggested and inspirational reading in those books. And it's just essentially, it's what it says on the tin. And, you know, if you were a kid and you saw John Bellairs or Roger Zelazny or anybody in between, and you hadn't read their books, and let's be honest, if you're of a certain age and you grew up in Dungeons and Dragons, there was no first edition. It was basic and advanced. You had probably already read The Hobbit, maybe some Conan stories and so on and etc. TCC, good to see you. Welcome, welcome. So, odds are you saw those lists. Maybe you went, yes, well, of course I've read Conan. Of course I've read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And, maybe you're one of those weird kids who had a collection of pickled sharks or something. And you read H.P. Lovecraft too. But odds are, Lord Misfit, hello. Daniel Roan, greetings. Odds are you were in the know, right? We all saw that. A weird thing happened between like 2008 and 2013. And I call it the Cretaceous period in TTRPGs, not the Cretaceous period, the Cretaceous period. When all these cretins out of nowhere crawled up, and I mean, my back was turned. Ooh, that is a good one, and thank you for the super. Thank you for the super, Gonzalo. I really appreciate it. Super Gonzalo. I'll leave that up there for a few minutes until someone decides to match or exceed his super. But anyway, so there was this period that cropped up, and I feel slightly responsible for it. Thank you, Kabuki. I do appreciate that. Jane Morrow, hello. Because as I've said before, I sort of kind of kickstarted the OSR, not in the sense of finance, and I made it, I put a financial back. It kind of happened because of what I was doing. And I have third-party, uninterested parties who've confirmed that for me. That's not just me blowing smoke up my own hind end. But and of the regrets about jump-starting that I've got, American Brad Canada, hello. One of them would be that out of nowhere, out of these dark corners, scuttled some people who decided that they were going to be the brand leaders and the voices in the OSR. Now, back then, and for me, it's as true today, the only leader of the OSR are these TSR books. But I would also say that nowadays, if you're going to listen to a person, it should probably be Rob Kuntz. There is, that's right, north of the Rockies, there's a sci-fi Appendix N in the back of Star Frontiers. You are correct. But anyway, so we sort of wound up with these wacky notions, and where this has to do and what this has to do with Appendix N is that among the you musts and thou wilts that came out of these people who decided that they were going to steer classic tabletop RPGs was that thou wilt incorporate every period, comma, semicolon, chapter header, page number, indices, and book art from everything in Appendix N, and that shall inform thy tabletop games forever. Amen. Or thou wilt be cast into darkness. And it was a weird cultish moment because, again, these people, these so-called influencers back in the day who tried to become self-styled steerers of classic TTRPGs, they obsessed over Appendix N. Like, oh, here's a person with a character that starts with B. Could this be where Gary got his inspiration for Big B? And I'm like, come on. And it was pretty bonkers. It was a pretty bonkers time. Now, those people can have face planted and made idiots out of themselves, or they've kind of scraped up all of their stuff into their little circus and carnival, and nobody really pays attention. It's kind of like the end of Here Comes Santa Claus, or Santa Claus is Coming to Town, the old Rankin Bass Animagic cartoon, when they're talking about the Burgermeisters. They're like, oh, people just forgot about them, or they died off or something, I don't know, and then they just kind of but oh, you guys talking about snow in southern Wisconsin? Yeah, I told you guys, when you sent me and the missus in 2023 to GaryCon, foot of snow on the ground, day 3 of our 6-day stay up there. Foot of snow on the ground. Yes, Robert Phillips, I'm sure he did. I mean, I'm sure he told you he did. Anyhow, Tracy Thompson says, 9 Princes in Amber changed how you ran Magic. You never liked fancy and Magic and began to look at Magic holographically. Well, that's fine. That's cool. So, anyway, so yeah, people who got big heads insisted that Appendix N, like, it's a bit, they were kind of the proto grandfathers of the Bro SR. Like, you must read, again, the thou wilts. And when people started to ask Gary about it, because again, this started before he passed away, Gary's response was, these are just books I read. You might like them too. So, hey, Vinny, wave. So, now that we've set aside the idol worship, the idolatry of Appendix N, let's talk about what actually is in Appendix N. Let's look at what is in Appendix N rather than obsess over what's in Appendix N. And are you following the right blogs that talk about Appendix N? Are you in the right Google Plus circles for the right people who read Appendix N? Let's just ignore that. And like it should be taken, let's look at Appendix N. Yes, it's in the Dungeon Master's Guide, Gonzalo. And in fact, it is on page, what page are we on here? If I can move the PDF reader over here. We are on page 224. Now, I want to say this. This is kind of a wind up. I keep bearing the lead. I have a true first print Dungeon Master's Guide. This was not in there. I believe the true first print stopped at Appendix L. It has about 23 fewer pages than what most people got. This stuff was added later. After 1978 or 79, they added more stuff to it. So let's take a look at it. Now, this is probably going to be a couple of deep dives. You guys remember when I would do deep dives and we'd have to spread them out over multiple things? Well, here we are. So we're going to look at the list. Should have done this already. I apologize. I'm going to talk to you guys about the books I have read so far. And in a second part, because I think this will go for a while, in a second part, I'm going to do some homework between now and the next one. And then I'm going to talk about those. So here we go. Here we go. You feel free to read along. Insglade, hello, good to see you. Let's zoom in a bit. So, right off the bat, we have Poul Anderson's 3 Hearts and 3 Lions, The High Crusade, and The Broken Sword. Now, in terms of importance to Dungeons and Dragons, I would put them probably in that order. I would keep them in that order. But let's talk about them first. And I actually own many of these books. I thought about like grabbing them and holding them up. I can do that with a couple, but I don't think it would really avail, just because, I mean, I can jump zoom here and just for a moment. And so, you know, I've got a copy of 3 Hearts and 3. I mean, saying I've got a copy of 3 Hearts and 3 Lions doesn't really. So let's go back to the list. Poul Anderson, 3 Hearts and 3 Lions. Why is 3 Hearts and 3 Lions so darn important to first edition AD&D? 3 Hearts and 3 Lions has a monumental impact on Dungeons and Dragons in general. It brings us the concept of alignment. Now, a lot of you guys may jump in and say, but law and chaos and neutrality, Elric. No. 3 Hearts and 3 Lions precedes the Elric sagas by a good few years. So it's over there. I'm not saying Gary wasn't influenced by the Elric sagas. I'm just saying that's where it starts. Law, neutrality, chaos. What else? Let's see. You have the Nixie. Holger encounters a Nixie. Polymorph other, the spell. Regenerating, rubbery, skinny, eyeless, not eyeless in the sense they don't have any eyeballs at all, but just black pit eyes for trolls. The entire concept of paladins. The protection from evil, 10-foot radius. Now, it's not expressed if it is effective, but a local lord asks him to lay hands on his daughter who's cursed with lycanthropy. What else? The Paladin's intelligent warhorse is in there. I won't go so far as to say named swords because, my gosh, we go back to the time of, I almost said Charlemagne, not Charlemagne, but at the time of King Arthur, Excalibur. But more is the Swan May. That's right. The human who can turn into swan form. The Swan May in those books. Dwarves are prominently featured, but dwarves are in a fair few fantasy books. So that's 3 Hearts and 3 Lions right there. Now, The High Crusade is an interesting book. The High Crusade is a funny book. Oh, and I should also mention about Three Hearts and Three Lions, evil elves. I won't go so far as to say drow because they are described as fair skinned, but also I think kobolds. I think the elves keep some kobolds as slaves. They might have been goblins. I said I have to go back and reread it. Oh no. Yay! American Brad Canada. Enjoy it. So the High Crusade. Here's kind of a brief plot summary of the High Crusade. An alien race comes to conquer Earth during the Middle Ages. They land their spaceship, and it lands, like a SpaceX rocket, or like they pictured rockets in the 1950s landing. And everyone watching this is like, castle fell out of the sky. We know about storming castles. And essentially, medieval knights, followed by peasantry, priests, and everything else, lay siege to this metal castle, kill almost the entire crew, and then command the remaining crew to show them how it works. Because they think, we can just move this metal castle, because they observed the metal castle firing beams of fire and destroying things. Well, we could conquer all of Christendom. So they but the crew hornswoggles them and takes off for deep space. Now, the people of the High Crusade, they're not ignorant. They're not low IQ. I mean, just because you live in a time when scientific advancement hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that you don't understand the concepts. They begin to understand very quickly the principles of space flight, of energy weapons, and so on. When mankind, in the distant future, at the end of the book, expand out into the stars, they find that humanity's already been there. Feudal England, now peopled by aliens and innumerable others who have accepted the grace of God, are now spread out across the stars. Gary, as we'll get into as we look at some more of these books, absolutely loved mixing sci-fi and fantasy. He adored it. And one of the places where that comes from is the High Crusade. There's not a lot of fantasy as far as wizards or anything like that. This is all practical science. One of my favorite parts in the book is when the knights are looking for things to use as trebuchet ammunition, and they come upon a box of metallic spheres that they're lobbing, because they're lobbing rocks, laying siege to another alien city when they've arrived on this planet. And they're like, well, let's throw one of these. And they pick it up and they're handling it roughly, and it starts to beep. And a red light starts to flash on it, and they say, hey, we should probably launch this thing now. It seems angry. And they lob it at the alien city. It's a tactical nuclear weapon. And the aliens that they laid siege to suddenly are horrified because they have no defense against this stealth missile launcher. They couldn't pick it up on any of their sensors. They saw no, they saw no like exhaust plume or anything like that. So I do recommend the High Crusade. It informs D&D slightly if you're into some of the stuff like having various bits of technology show up in your AD&D games, and they do in first edition AD&D. So let's continue. And that's just three. Oh, I almost forgot. The Broken Sword. So The Broken Sword is an interesting fantasy novel that deals with elves and their war against trolls and orcs, but it takes place in ancient Scandinavia. Humans cannot see or detect in any way elves, trolls, goblins, orcs, and so on. They have mighty battles in open fields in the middle of the day, and a human might walk right through the middle of it, and the only thing that they would sense is like the wind would blow stronger and colder. Hello, TXG. I am trying to think if there are any specific D&D elements that came from it other than it just being a damn good fantasy novel. I guess if you look at things like Aerial Servant or Sylphs or other creatures that are mostly undetectable by mortal eyes, you might take that from here as an influence. So we're going to move on. I know of The Face in the Frost. I haven't read it. A few artists only get mentioned. A few authors. Well, writing is an art. Get mentioned by name, but not any specific works. Lee Brackett, of course, wrote a lot of fantasy and a lot of science fiction. I think Lee Brackett has Star Trek episodes that she wrote. Same with Frederick Brown, no specific mentions. Edgar Rice Burroughs. Edgar Rice Burroughs' fingerprints are all over Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, an underground civilization, a fantastic lost world underground. I mean, AD&D has got dinosaurs in it for a reason, guys. I don't know, Damien. I honestly don't. TXG is over here asking the important questions. Do I think a thorough exploration of the sources in Appendix N is necessary to understand D&D? To enjoy it and play it and love it, and even to grasp the history? No, I don't think so. And that goes back to what I was saying before you got here, TXG, that a lot of people obsessed, like for some reason, it was like 2005 to 2014, 2015. There were people who styled themselves as the quote unquote leaders of the OSR who absolutely insisted that if you didn't squeeze every drop of juice out of every one of these books and authors and make sure it got in your AD&D game, were you really playing D&D? You know, typical obsessive behavior. So anyway, yes, the Pellucidar series, A Hollow Earth, and that goes. I mean, there's a whole section of basic D&D, isn't there, called Hollow World or Hollow Earth? The Mars series, one of the original, not the original, but one of the original isekais, as kids these days say. The Mars series, the Venus series. John Carter of Mars. I mean, as far as influence on D&D, teleportation. Hello. ESP, because Martians have natural ESP and Martians have natural extrasensory powers. Humans don't. That's what made John Carter super dangerous. John Carter could ambush you. This whole honor duel stuff, or even an assassin would have to honor duel you on Mars because, but John Carter couldn't read his alien mind. But one of the great adventures that Gary sent Ernie on was Ernie went to Mars and learned 2-weapon fighting from John Carter. And he got to Mars by studying a star pattern of gems embedded in the ceiling of a room in Castle Greyhawk. The Venus series is more of the same. More good stuff. There are dungeons on Mars. Lightless pits. Tunnels that had not seen someone coming by, like an intelligent person coming by. Typically these were for sick and twisted Jedaks to condemn the unwanted to wander until something nameless ate them. Tungion, the worst of the eons. That is badass, Daniel Rowan. All right, so what can we say about Burroughs, though? The guy understood the fantastic. Moving on. This is one that I've read. Lest Darkness Fall by L. Sprague de Camp. Also et al., because L. Sprague de Camp has written a lot of stuff. Lest Darkness Fall is another time travel isekai story. Well, it's time travel and isekai. It's rather humorous. It's about a fellow who travels back to around the year 700, just outside Rome, and he sets about stopping Rome from falling. The darkness in the title references the Dark Ages, which weren't, by the way. That's something, So, now one I want to mention by L. Sprague de Camp and Fletcher Pratt, I believe it is. Is the Carnelian Cube. The Carnelian Cube itself is a magic item that shows up in AD&D. It's essentially a 6-sided gate that takes you to random worlds when you press the sides. One of them is always hell. You will always go to a layer of hell. One of the sides. So there's the Carnelian Cube. Now, it is not called in AD&D the Carnelian Cube, but it is described as being a cube made out of carnelian gemstone. So, moving right along. August Derleth and Lord Dunsany. Now, unfortunately, a lot of HPL's work got polluted by August Derleth, who also claimed that he had... We probably wouldn't have as extensive a collection of HPL's works still these days. I have a wonderful hardback collection from the 1970s, I think. It's the complete works of H.P. Lovecraft, complete fictional work of H.P. Lovecraft, not counting his story, or his essay on writing horror and the supernatural, because that's nonfiction, obviously. But H.P. Lovecraft actually wrote a history of Ontario, Canada. He wrote a book about Ontario, and apparently was fairly well regarded if you like that sort of thing. And we might not have those without the work of August Derleth, but August Derleth turned the Cthulhu cycle into almost like the Old Testament. Man of War, Lynn Carter get bonked for some reason. Well, no. I'm going over the stuff I know initially with the deep dive. I'm not like dismissing it as not being good. Like, I don't want to say, yes, the World's End series is good because it's a book about a world that is ending. No, I'm going to talk about the books out of this list that I've read. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to start doing some homework. Philip Jose Farmer's The World of Tears series. Philip Jose Farmer was a prolific, many of these guys were prolific authors, and women. When I say guys, I'm referring to everyone on the list. Hello, Dungeon Minister. Yeah. Derleth's take on the Cthulhu cycle was that basically the old gods were neutral to borderline friendly to humanity, and they had a war with the outer gods, who's like Cthulhu and Nyarlathotep and all of them, and basically there was a war in heaven and so on and etc. And he really leans a lot more heavily into cosmic good and evil versus just cosmic indifference by the beings out there. Take care, Daniel Rowan. Thank you for stopping by. And welcome, Dungeon Minister. You can sit in Daniel's seat. But moving on. Lord Dunsany. Oh my gosh, do yourself a favor and read, if you're not going to read anything else by Dunsany, read The King of Elfland's Daughter. Lots of good D&D stuff in there, and it's just a lovely, lovely fantasy story. Predates Tolkien's work, but there's a lot of good fantasy in there. There's the concepts of assembling a party, of seeing a high-level magic user to have a magic item made, fire and forget spells and scrolls. I'm not saying they came from there. I'm just saying that Gary saw them and said, oh, well, or he might have. But anyway, to go back to Philip Jose Farmer, The World of Tears is an interesting read. And again, it's an isekai. And it is literally what it says on the tin. It is a multi-level mega dungeon, if you will, of different societies. And there are fantasy tropes living on each layer of this world it's like flat earths, one stacked on top of the other. I can't recall as there's a central pillar separating them or if they just float one above the other. But it's a good read. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Daniel. But let's continue on. By the way, I hope you guys notice what a good boy I was, and I didn't mention that dungeon, that AD&D creation software I'm working on. Not once. Damn it! All right, let's move on. Now, Gardner Fox, I have read some of Gardner Fox, and it was actually the dragon that introduced me. He wrote stories specifically for TSR and specifically for the dragon, and you can find them if you can find the back issues of Dragon magazine. He wrote basically a novella length story that spanned many issues of the dragon. I have read some other works by Gardner Fox. They're fantasy, but they're a different kind of fantasy. Let's just say that old Gardner Fox probably figured out the sword and sorcery wasn't putting all of the groceries on the table. And we'll move on. Robert E. Howard Conan. Of course, I've read Robert E. Howard's Conan stories. You've read Robert E. Howard's Conan stories. Kull the Conqueror. I mean, oh my God. To say that Conan has an influence. This is not the only occurrence. If you pull up this PDF, if you have the PDF of the Dungeon Master's Guide and do a word search for Conan, I think it appears like 4 times in the PDF. I mean, just the barbarian as a class, the fighter thief. There's so much to say. Very true, north of the Rockies. That is very true. Now, Sterling Linear. I was a little surprised to see Hero's Journey show up in here once. After I read Hero's Journey, I was like, I understand why it's in here, but it's also kind of curious. I would expect that to have shown up in an Appendix N for Gamma World. But finding a fabled machine of the ancients, the thrust of Hero's Journey is that he is sent out to find computer. Discover computer. What is computer? Find computer. And you know, AD&D itself, you have the fabled machine of Lum the Mad, which is by all intents and purposes, if you read the description, it's a computer. So yes, Sterling Linear's Hero's Journey. Fritz Leiber, Fofford and Gray Mouser series et al. I would just like to think that Gary leaned over, like Fritz was sitting on the couch, smoking his pipe, ogling Mary Jo. Gary's at his typewriter. Hey, Fritz, you want me to put you in the Dungeon Master's Guide? Very well, you know. I mean, Fofford and Gray Mouser, Thieves Guild, the Thieves class, thieves having better saving throws versus spells than you would expect they would. They go on dungeon adventures. There are magic items abounding. So much goodness. I could just do deep dives on Fritz Leiber's work alone. H.P. Lovecraft. We've kind of touched on Lovecraft. I read every short story by Lovecraft and his fragments, his commonplace book stuff. There is a Cthulhu Mythos section for AD&D. I mean, that should tell you what a shadow across AD&D that Lovecraft casts. By the way, if you're taking these words from me about these authors, like if you're like, is Bill saying that I should be reading these? Yes, absolutely. Daniel, having wizards as patrons, sure. Now there's an A Merit book that I have that strongly influences early Greyhawk. We're here. We're on A Merit. I have it. I haven't finished reading it yet because I have bad memories of my life. Bad things were going on in my life when I tried to read that book for the first time. I went to local used bookstore. I was like, hey, some A Merit. I'm going to buy this and read this. And every time now when I pick the book up, I think of some bad shit that was going down. So I'll get back to it someday. But it's not listed here. Unless it's Dwellers in the Mirage. I just remember that it was an A Merit book and I never finished it because after a horrible week, like it just like stuck in my mind. That week was so bad. Let me tell you guys something. I was willing to pay someone $3,000. I was going to fly across the country on my own money and hand them $3,000 cash if they would give me a job. Like, hire me. Here. I'm bribing you to hire me. Because the job I was at was making me that miserable. So anyway, moving on. Michael Moorcock, Stormbringer, Stealer of Souls, a Hawkmoon series, especially first 3 books, the Chronicles, Corum, the entire Elric saga, the whole of the Champion Eternal books, every single one of them. Intelligent, soul-sucking swords, law, chaos, demon patrons, planar travel. I mean, my God, what is not to say that Moorcock did not influence D&D some way with? Oh, it's 20 years ago. Wave. It still hurts. It still causes me discomfort. Maybe I'll have a beer and just have a BS night one night and tell you guys about that nightmare. Yes, again, law, neutrality, chaos, firming up the quote-unquote alignment system that was introduced to Gary, I think, probably in 3 Hearts and 3 Lions. Andre Norton, and we've talked about this on the show. I've been over on Tim Imholt's channel and talked about it. Tim's done videos on it. I've mentioned it time and again. It was one of the first things I ever reviewed. And that is Quagkeep by Andre Norton. Mrs. Norton wrote the first Dungeons and Dragons novel ever, Quagkeep. Do recommend. And she has earned her place in this list. All right. Now, okay, I have to stop on Fred Saberhagen. When I was a kid and we first moved to Florida, yes, really, Gonzalo. When I first moved to Florida, for reasons that I won't get into here right now, most of our belongings that weren't clothes and the tools that my father needed for his trade, drywall, had to be left behind in Alabama until we could go up and retrieve them a couple of years later. It sucked. It's all my Star Wars toys, all my books, everything left in Alabama. Well, I remember going to the local branch of the library looking for a book, just something, anything to do. And I found this cool looking science fiction book by somebody with the improbable name of Saberhagen or Saberhagen or Saberhagen. It was called Berserker. And I sat down and I started to flip through it, and I was in love. It's called The Berserker Wars. And it was a collection of short stories about essentially von Neumann machines. That's a machine that goes someplace, breaks that place apart to make more of itself, and then keep going. But the Berserkers had a purpose. The Berserkers were programmed to fight in a war hundreds of thousands of years before mankind got up out of the Pleistocene era. That's a caveman time, right, isn't it? Anyway, it was implied that man was still hunting the last of the mammoths when this war that had lasted tens of thousands of years was concluded. The Berserkers were the only survivors of that war. They were the only survivors of that war because a race simply called the Builders, fighting against the horrible, implacable Red Race and losing, had invented the Berserkers as the ultimate weapon. And they sent them out against the Red Race. The Berserkers were artificially intelligent. Their strategies were chosen in the Berserker's brain based on random numbers generated by the decay of a long-lived isotope. So they were just incredibly unpredictable, but their overriding order was kill all life and the potential for it wherever you find it. They wiped out the Red Race, they exterminated them, they sterilized their planets, and then they turned on the Builders. And they drifted aimlessly through the galaxy looking for more sentient species to eradicate. And it's right about that time in the 30th century when they make contact with humankind. That was my full knowledge of Fred Saberhagen's work. He was the guy who wrote the Berserker series. And I have a stack of paperbacks of Berserker stories by Saberhagen. But Fred Saberhagen wrote a massive library of pure high fantasy novels. The Book of Swords, and so on. The Book of Swords cycle which I have not read, and nor have I read Changeling Earth, but Saberhagen is an engaging, good writer. Read Fred Saberhagen. Tolkien, J.R.R. Do I need to say it? Do you guys want me to laud and heap praise? What'd you think of the sword, the swords books? Dungeon Minister, let me know. But yeah, J.R.R. Tolkien, the first long form high fantasy I read at age 7, The Hobbit, and then I immediately jumped into The Lord of the Rings, and then I read the Silmarillion, and I've read it almost every year since then. Jack Vance. Oh my God. The influence Jack Vance had over D&D is as strong probably as anything else. So what people call Vancian magic came from here. Now, this sticks in my throat a little bit. And I just want to mention this. When a magic user memorizes a spell in AD&D, they do not forget how to cast it. Magic user always knows how to cast Magic Missile if he has that spell in a spell book and he studies it. The thing about it is the energies he stores up through the recitation of the formulas, that flies out of him. He doesn't just, I knew how to cast Magic Missile 5 minutes ago. Now I don't know it. Hey, Rob Turner. And so many named spells. Someone mentioned way early on in the conversation that Vance's work was where named spells originated. Like that kind of kick started the habit of this person's this and that person's the other when it came to spells. Mordenkainen's Faithful Hound, Big Beast Clenched Fist, that Gary kind of borrowed that. And that's fine. But yeah, The Dying Earth, Eyes of the Overworld, Kujal the Clever. So many works by Vance. Oh yeah, Prismatic Sphere, Prismatic Spray, Prismatic Wall. Those all have their origin in there. In fact, there is actually a Dying Earth RPG that went up until the late 90s, early 2000s. And the newsletter, their Dragon magazine, was actually called The Excellent Prismatic Spray. Robert Santon, hello. Yeah, Vance wrote a lot of science fiction as well. The Last Castle is a good science fiction book. Weinbaum, Stanley, Manly Wade Wellman. I haven't read anything. I will get back to you guys on that. Jack Williamson. Jack Williamson. So much good stuff, but I've only read science fiction by Jack Williamson. I know. Roger Zelazny, when it comes to him, I have read the Amber series. The ones that you got from Doubleday Book Club, the sci-fi book club. Loved the Amber series. Good stuff. Basically men as demigods. So that is what I have read of Appendix N. Now, the paragraph that kicks off Appendix N, I quite like, because it is a word from Gary to you, from Gary to us, and I like it quite a bit. Inspiration for all of the fantasy work I have done stems directly from the love my father showed when I was a lad, for he spent many hours telling me stories he made up as he went along, tales of cloaked old men who could grant wishes, of magic rings and enchanted swords, or wicked sorcerers and dauntless swordsmen. Then, too, countless hundreds of comic books went down, and the long gone EC ones certainly had their effect. Science fiction, fantasy, and horror movies were a big influence. In fact, all of us tend to get ample helpings of fantasy when we are very young from fairy tales such as those written by the brothers Grimm and Andrew Lang. This often leads to reading books of mythology, paging through bestiaries, and consultation of compilations of the myths of various lands and people. Upon such a base, I built my interest in fantasy, being an avid reader of all science fiction and fantasy literature since 1950. The following authors were of particular inspiration to me. In some cases, I cite specific works. In others, I simply recommend all of their fantasy writing to you. From such sources, as well as just about any other imaginative writing or screenplay, you will be able to pluck kernels from which grow fruits of exciting campaigns. Good reading. Absolutely. Hey, I was a Walden Books Other Worlds Book Club member too. That was an awesome time, was it not? Buying 10 paperbacks and realizing you could go to the mall and get an 11th for free. So that's my guided tour of what I've read and what I can recommend of all of Appendix N. Now, the only one that gives me pause is August Derleth. I am entirely certain that August Derleth probably has some work of his where he didn't write anything about HPL or Cthulhu or anything like that. And it's probably fine reading. But if we're just talking about his Cthulhu cycle stuff, otherwise, every author that I mentioned that I've read, I loved their work. Even in the case of Jack Williamson and Fred Saberhagen, sorry, had a senior moment. Even with just having read their science fiction, guys, I can recommend everything on that list that I know to y'all. The A. Merritt book that I never finished, I liked what I read. Now, David, that's a fair question. Even to Camp's Conan Hackups. So let me frame DeCamp's work this way for more palatability. You guys know how there's the gospel according to the world of Greyhawk for AD&D. And I've said if Jim, Gary, or Rob didn't write it, it's not really, it's not really canon. You might. Oh, American Brad Canada is speaking my language. Paperbacks, Dragon magazines, and a Computes Gazette. But you might. Goodbye, Jane. Have a lovely evening. Hope all's well. You might pick up works by me or by someone else who's done a pretty good job of making a homebrew Greyhawk D&D module. Now, I don't profess to be the successor to Gary Gygax, but I've made some pretty good stuff. So maybe take it in that vein. Regardless of what DeCamp might have said to position himself as an authority, maybe take it in that vein. The only Conan book I have ever read that I didn't like, and I didn't like it like with a read through with adult eyes, because I got the novelization of Conan the Destroyer when we were on vacation somewhere once. I just wanted a book to read in the car for the ride home. Take care, TXZ. I'm wrapping up here in a minute. You guys aren't going to miss too much. And I read it, and when I was, 11, 12, 13 when it came out, I was like, cool, it's a novelization of the book, or novelization of the film. And then I went back and read it after reading some Howard later in life, because I hadn't read any Howard Conan stories. I just like Conan the Barbarian the movie and Conan the Destroyer the movie. No, David, I understand that. I understand that completely. And I agree with you in that. Like, I worked for Gary, but I would never try and sneak out like Teeth of the Barkesh Noor. I would never I can't say never. I wouldn't try and I wouldn't lie to Heidi Gygax about it. I get it. I wouldn't take advantage of them. You don't have to buy anything of mine, American Brad Canada. Just subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me over on Twitter. And I'll send you 5 free first edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons modules. Nothing I've written that's gotten published gives me money anymore. It'll give money to Frog God Games. Not to me. Anyway, to go back to the issue of Elsprague de Camp. And the only Conan book I ever read that I didn't like. So later in life, after having read some Howard and even some Elsprague de Camp, I went back and I read Conan the Destroyer. And I was like, you know what? This is awful. The movie wasn't great, but this is awful. It was written by Robert Jordan. Robert, I wrote 52 pounds, 12 linear feet of Wheel of Time books, Jordan. And then I found out Jordan did a lot of other Conan books. And I went and I read a couple of those just to make sure. Yeah, nope. Nope, not good Conan books. Just at a glance. I didn't read through them all the way. But yeah, so Robert Jordan, Conan the Destroyer, the only Conan book I read that I just was like, don't like. I know how you feel, Wave. I know how you feel. I tend to stay away from art. Like, let me tell you, I know nothing at all, nothing about the band AC/DC. I don't know about their personal lives, their private lives, and I don't want to. Couldn't tell you a thing. Started reading up on Eddie Van Halen not too long ago. Horrible person. Terrible person. There's some things I know about Jimmy Page, who's still around, that I wish I didn't know. And it does color my appreciation. And you come to where I think we should say we've reached the peak of tonight's conversation. Wonderful Wizard of Games. This is a good statement. Gonzalo, that's funny. That's funny. All of this stuff that I just shared with you guys, and that wonderful paragraph from Gary. But all of that stuff, yeah, you want to talk about people who weren't really great, Stone. Now, Jim Ward and Dave Cook and a few others worked on second edition. Jim met Gary in a bookstore in Lake Geneva. Jim was buying exactly the same books that Gary was buying, the same fantasy and science fiction novels in that bookstore in Lake Geneva. And that's how they met. Now, Tom Savini would like that, American Brad. Regardless of what I think about second edition, I know that it was in the hands of people to whom Appendix N would apply, if you will. Past second edition, when TSR became a book mill, I mean fantasy books, Dragonlance, Forgotten Realms. I am not casting aspersions on the works of Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss and Ed Greenwood and others who wrote those books. But when TSR became a book mill and people started consuming D&D literature, D&D fiction, D&D became an Ouroboros of self-referential. D&D no longer drew from the rich ecosystem of fantasy. D&D fantasy became D&D's fantasy. And that is that is a big reason for why D&D sucks these days. How successful are you going to be if you're climbing up the side of a mountain and you say, I need 12 more feet of rope? I'm going to cut 12 feet off this rope that I'm hanging on to and hopefully tie it on quick enough so I can keep climbing. And that's where D&D has gotten. D&D's fantasy inspiration is just Dungeons and Dragons anymore. And I'm sorry, but I think a lot of people adopting now, not back in I can't believe I'm referring to 11 years ago as a good time for D&D, but not back when 5e first rolled out. But now, honestly, I think, thank you, Robert Santon. Thank you very much. Self-referential, a cut flower garden, exactly, Dungeon Minister. And it is cannibalistic wave of mutilation, very much so. But I feel like I don't know, probably starting around the human malware time, halfway through the life of 5th edition, that people just played it for memes. Lol, horny bard. Lol, mysterious tiefling. Thank you, Gonzalo. Thank you very much for your super. They just don't look outside anymore. And if they do, it's in the most stupid. I mean, if in 1st or 2nd edition they'd introduced Iron Man's armor, and they actually kind of did in Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. You can find power armor in there. It won't last you long. Might kill you trying to wear it. Hagar, that's, yeah. And it's like, you know, I see stuff now. Granted, it's fan sites and it's not Wizards doing it, but it's like, you know, a simple guide to incorporating the Avengers into your AD&D game, or into your Dungeons and Dragons 5e game. I mean, that's kind of neat on the face of it, but you know they're only doing it because the Avengers, Dungeons and Dragons, the SEO will be optimized. We're going to get so many click-throughs, so many impressions. And Wizards is kind of going that way. Odd Scimitar says, I hate what happened to the hobby. You grew up reading fantasy novels and watching fantasy movies. It's impossible to find people that enjoy the game. It really is. It really is. The only inspiration outside that seems to drive people towards D&D is a bunch of clowns at Critical Role. Sorry, CR fans. Sorry, CR. What do I think about castles and... I'm assuming that's what you mean by CNC. Now, I like I like Stranger Things, so I can't throw too many aspersions. And I'm sorry for that if that bugs you, but... Was it Palladium or Torg? I know they were very close. I feel like it was probably Palladium, but Torg did a multiverse thing right there. What do I think about Castles and Crusades? Well, I play tested it. I don't mean I tried it out. I mean, I was there when it was being play tested. I was on the playtest group. I wrote Castles and Crusades stuff for Gary Gygax. I guess I can't say too many bad things about it. My only problem with Castles and Crusades is it doesn't fill a snack hole that I need filled anymore. In 2004, you couldn't get physical D&D, and Gary was writing for it. So it was a great option. Now, if somebody says, Bill, I want to play first edition AD&D, what do? Oh, here's the link to DTRPG. Go buy A Player's a Monster and a Dungeon Master's Guide, and you're good to go. If you want some modules, I recommend these. Bada bing, bada boom. You're done. So I kind of don't, Take care, Dungeon Minister. Thank you for hanging out with us tonight. I kind of don't need it. Now, are you asking me, do I recommend it? Do I think it's a good? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, it's a good game. I just think that AD&D is a better game. And if you ask me, like, Bill, do you want to play Castles and Crusades, or I can run some AD&D First Edition? I'm not going to get the shun of edition out of your mouth before I'm rolling up an AD&D character. So I don't dislike Castles and Crusades. I just have my preference. But if somebody says to me, yeah, you know, I'm playing a Greyhawk campaign. Awesome. I'm using Castles and Crusades. That's awesome. I'm playing all the classic modules, but I'm converting them to Castles and Crusades. Very cool. It would be a strange turn of a conversation to have with someone, but I do get it. People like will just ping me on social media like, I got your modules. Oh, that's nice. I'm glad you. I hope you're subscribed to me on YouTube. I am. Very cool. I'm converting them to Castles and Crusades, you know. Okay. Yeah. They're Castles and Crusades. I'm making them. I'm playing them in my Castles and Crusades. My World of Arid, whatever their default campaign is. That's where your modules are now. Okay. It's like buying a used car from me and then calling me up weekly to tell me what changes you're making. I don't care. It's yours. Do what you want with it. Robert Santon, absolutely. We are playing tomorrow night. We are playing Gamma World. We are kicking off at 9 Eastern, and it ended on a cliffhanger last week. They're being attacked by killbots outside the remains of an ancient military installation. So be here for that. Yeah, I mean, somebody even told me once, like, and they meant it sincerely, like, yeah, me and my group still play 4E, so I hope you're not mad I kind of converted your modules. I'm like, I'm not. It's not like you went to my Google Drive and like uploaded yours and overwrote mine, and they're gone forever now. I'm not. Do what you want. Just don't publish them and sell them. Yeah, I mean, I am flattered that people are using my stuff for everything. Someone once told me they converted it to Savage Worlds, that they felt Savage Worlds filled their D&D snack hole, and that was like, yeah, we played D&D from 1980 to 2010, and we're just like, we're done. We're switching, and Savage Worlds is everything we wanted it to be. And I got your modules, and I converted them to Savage Worlds. Very cool. Exactly, Hager the Horrible. I just want people to have fun, just like Gary wanted people to have fun. You know, I have to say, and I haven't seen 6E yet, but I have to say, as prescient and now as brain rot meme culture is, I feel like 4E was more brain rot meme culture than 5E. Hey, Wave, thank you very much. Love you to pieces. Thank you. You guys are the best. You really are. Yeah, 4E feels more brain rot meme culture to me than Core 5E did. Core 5E is practically original D&D compared to 4th edition. I won't tolerate that. I won't tolerate that. If I find out that somebody converted my module to metric, I'll come to your house and erase it from your hard drive. I'll install Windows 3.1 on your computer. Yeah, there you go. There you go, Wonderful Wizard of Games. It was the one they play, and I know there's people who are fans of it. I get it. But the granddaddy of brain rot meme culture was Big Bang Theory. Rob, I will shoot your porch light out in Minecraft. One of my favorite memes is it's the soldier from Team Fortress 2. And I don't know if this is something you can do in the game or whatever, but he's like got a couple of M16s, brass flying out. You know, that Team Fortress 2, The Incredibles art style, muzzle flashes, his mouth is open, and the caption on the bottom is, "What the fuck is a kilometer?" Wave of Mutilation, you got it. You got it. One of the great moments in MASH. One of the great moments in MASH. The episode was called The Big Game. And it was Colonel Blake relating being the team doctor for the Indiana football team playing Ohio State. And they had a player get injured. Score was tied. End of the game. Player gets injured. He rushes out on the field, tapes the guy's ankle up tight. Final play of the game. He takes the quarterback takes a snap, hands off to the running back. Running back hits the ground screaming. And Radar's talking to him and he goes, "Tackled." And Colonel Blake goes, "Nope. I taped the wrong ankle." And Radar goes, "Wow, did he forgive you?" And he's like, "Every year he comes to my house and shoots out my front porch light. And he's a judge now." Odd Scimitar says, have a great stream as always, or great stream as always, but you have to go. Yes, I do have you on Discord. So excellent. Yes. Yeah, so I'm basically kind of run out of steam, guys. Yes, that is a great skit too, Joe. That is a great skit too. So, I guess I guess I'm gonna get on out of here, guys. So before I go, do you guys want another deep dive on Appendix N after I've read these other authors' works, at least enough of them to get a taste? Like, I'm not gonna go read like every other book Zelazny wrote. All right, I wouldn't be back for a couple of years. If you guys want that, let me know. Social media, you can reach me. I got a Gmail address right down there. Everybody, please, if you haven't already, click the subscribe button. Click the bell icon for notifications. Thank you all very much. Gonzalo Lira for the generous supers. Robert Santon, Wave of Mutilation. You guys literally help keep the lights on around here. I really do appreciate it. But you know, the one thing we didn't really explore tonight, and I was kind of curious about this, and maybe we can kind of, maybe we'll find out between now and the next show, is where'd the owl bear come from? Peace, good night, love you all.
Have you seen my owl bear? Here's to all the weirdos everywhere, in the woods and in the air. Have you seen my owl bear? Should I shave off all my hair? bobs are all around. Some live in tunnels underground. Some are fat, some are rich, some are sleeping in a ditch. Can you ride a crooked horse without a saddle, way off course? Naked as a toad, all the way to Smoky Joe's. Have you seen the little creep driving fast in his little green Jeep? He smells like fish and brandy, but his rotten teeth look dandy. Take me to the show, I don't care if fast or slow. From action flicks to dance